Welcome to the Soccer Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Scott Mowbray, and in each episode I will discuss the key topics that impact on football coaching from the foundation and youth development phases. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hi, George. Welcome to the Soccer Coaching Podcast.
Hi, Scott. Thanks for having me on. Like I said earlier, apologies for a bit of a delay in getting back, but no, it's great to be on.
No, not at all. Not at all. Well, I think we spoke very briefly before we've hit the record button here, but I've seen a few of your things on Twitter and some of the other bits and pieces you've done on YouTube and things. So it was always a case of being keen to get you on and have a chat about the stuff you're doing because I think it's great, but obviously at the right time when you were ready for it. So you paced yourself accordingly.
No, yeah, I appreciate that. And looking forward to getting on with it. Yeah.
Top bad. Well, just a bit about your background then, if you don't mind. We often start off with this with guests just so we get a feel for kind of where they're at in their careers, if you like. So just anything around you, kind of what your journey so far up to this point?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm only 22, so I suppose I'm still in the early stages of my journey, if you like. But in terms of, I guess, sort of playing sports growing up, always sort of played a range of sports, but sort of football was always the one that I sort of focused on and happened to be a little bit better at than other sports. Didn't play to any sort of great level at all, just sort of local football as I was growing up, and county level at under 18s. But apart from that was really it. Really, as I was sort of going into that sort of post-16 age in terms of my coaching, that's where it sort of started really. So I did a futsal program, which was run by Plymouth Argyle, so an education program, and that was sort of based in Cornwall. And then through that, I basically started volunteering as a community coach within the Argyle and the Community Trust program. So from there, sort of just started doing the community work. So in terms of in school, after school clubs, development centres, and then sort of picked up my level 1 and my level 2 sort of within, I guess, a year of doing that. And that sort of just progressed and continued really in terms of doing the community work in schools pretty much on a daily basis, just sort of building up experience in terms of that environment. And then when I got to when I finished that course at 18, moved on to university. So I went to Plymouth Marjon University in Plymouth, and I did a football development and coaching degree. So when I sort of moved up to Plymouth, I continued my community coaching for Argyle in the Community Trust still, but based in Plymouth rather than Cornwall. In terms of before I went to uni as well, I sort of volunteered at the local Centre of Excellence as well for Plymouth. So that was a case of when I first sort of went up there of just observing the coaches and watching the sessions and, picking up the cone, standing in the rain and just sort of picking up bits and pieces from watching the coaches, which was really great. And through that, I sort of progressed to an assistant coach at that centre. And then when I moved to Plymouth to start university, it was quite a nice sort of transition in terms of they had a couple of different centre of excellences across sort of Devon. So from going from an assistant, I then went to a lead coach across 2 different centres on a Thursday and Friday night. So I sort of carried across that coaching when I went to university, so I could carry that alongside my studies, and then sort of continued that over the first 2 years of my degree and into my final year. But I was quite fortunate in the fact that I managed to get onto my UEFA B on my final year of university. So I sort of started that, and in terms of the university I was at, I was quite fortunate in one of my lecturers there was basically created a local grassroots team there. So I sort of spoke to him and try and identify a sort of a grassroots team that I could work with, and ended up taking the under 18s actually for that club. And I was only 20 at the time, so it was a bit of one of them where it's in terms of not much difference in age, but it was a great learning experience for me in terms of I guess managing individuals, but also coaching and relating that to the game as well. So during that, and then sort of alongside that as well, just to add a few more bits to my day, I was working 30 hours a week for the community program then as well. So my third year of uni was pretty busy to say the least, but it was a great experience.
Did you get the degree?
In terms of I did in the end actually. So I was very busy, but it was one of them where I suppose the hard work sort of rewarded me in terms of the experience I gained. And I suppose going on from uni, I sort of carried on that community coaching role in terms of in-school work and development centres, and then I sort of started my academy journey, if you like, in terms of working in Plymouth's academy. So sort of my first season went in as the assistant to the under-13s, and that again was a great experience in terms of, although I'd been involved a little bit in terms of academy football before that, in terms of being there on a consistent basis, this was sort of the first sort of opportunity I had, which was, great. And to be sort of working with other great coaches and watching other great coaches, which are, a lot more experienced than me, and got lots of other ideas and sort of knowledge that I could sort of learn from. Again, it was a great experience. And then, from there, sort of, I went for a job interview at the time as a head of recruitment for the academy at the club. And although I didn't get it, I had an interview, and it was, a great experience. Looking back, it wasn't the right job for me, and it was sort of more of a case, it was, limited opportunity. So I thought I'd just try it. But it was a great sort of experience in terms of learning. And to be honest, that was probably the first proper interview I've actually had. So in terms of that, it was, I guess another experience to add to that. And then, I'm now sort of working full time at the Cornwall Football Association. So my role there at the moment is marketing and communications officer. So I'm sort of in charge of, I guess, the digital side in terms of the website and the sort of marketing campaigns on the social medias and stuff like that. So that's sort of my main job at the moment. And then alongside that, I'm the under-10s lead coach for Plymouth at the moment, which I'm loving. Obviously at the moment we can't get out and coach and stuff, which is frustrating, but hopefully soon we can get back out and get back out on the grass. And then I'm doing a master's alongside that, so that's through sort of blended learning as well. So that's sort of my short journey so far, but where I'm at currently.
Well, George, I don't know how you crammed so much into so few years. That's quite incredible, because you're still a young guy, right?
Well, I like to think so. I'm only 22, so
trust me, at my age, that's young, mate. So well done. You've done a lot in a short space of time. So congratulations, and obviously you have a passion for it all. We've had a few people who lectured on some of the degree programs around football and things on the podcast before, but I don't know if I've had anyone actually gone through the program. So you did the football development and coaching degree, did you? Is that what your degree was at Plymouth?
Yeah. So Plymouth Marjon, so football development and coaching degree. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't want to go into too much detail, but roughly, was it what you thought it was going to be? Did you enjoy it? Did you get loads out of it in relation to, I mean, what does it kind of cover and talk about? Because it sounds intriguing for someone who didn't have that opportunity when many moons ago, when the degrees were kind of more traditional, if you like. This is something I would have been loving if I'd have been 18, 19, 20 years old. Yeah. So was it what you thought it was going to be?
Yeah, I mean, it was a great experience, and it was, really rewarding for me. And I suppose ultimately, although I sort of had the connection in terms of the community coaching first, in terms of sort of a casual basis, it sort of, it ultimately prepared me for a job with, when I graduated. But I suppose, in terms of the program, it was really good in terms of providing different experiences and knowledge. So, for example, we had sort of coaching modules in terms of where we'd sort of, I guess, reflect and critique ourselves in terms of our coaching, and some analysis modules, but we'd also have the more development side of football, so the community and the wider sort of picture, and using sport for social good sort of side of it as well. So in terms of, in the second year off the top of my head, one thing that really sort of benefited me in terms of an experience on there, we did an events management module. So basically, me and a few others in the group, we were responsible for running a local, a football festival for local primary schools within Plymouth. And so we were basically in charge of everything in terms of advertising, setting it up on the day and stuff like that. So in terms of, I suppose, real life experience, that was really good. And I suppose alongside it, it was great in terms of the opportunities in terms of continuing my community coaching and my setbacks and stuff. But I was also able to do sort of for a few months like a voluntary analysis sort of placement in terms of helping the academy out as well with that. So I suppose in terms of giving me a good idea of sort of the overall picture, but different aspects in terms of development, or the more sort of, I guess, coaching or performance side of it as well. It was it was really good sort of grounding and base to sort of work off going forwards.
And you've obviously coached different age groups. Then going the under-18s was 20 years old. That's a huge thing to do, especially in grassroots football, that kind of adult senior team, if you like, because that's where they are, right? And you've done under-13s and under-10s and all sorts. So do you have a favourite kind of phase or age that you like to coach?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, like I said, I've probably worked sort of under-5s up to under 18s really. And obviously I've sort of been involved with adult football in terms of playing, not necessarily coaching, but I suppose at the moment I'm loving sort of working with the under 10s. And I suppose, although I'm not necessarily fixed on something in terms of going forwards, I do really enjoy the sort of the foundation phase, if you like, in terms of the energy and that sort of side of it, in terms of helping them, just love and enjoy the game. So I suppose that's probably where, I lie in terms of at the moment. But likewise, when I was with the under 18s, for example, I really enjoyed that in terms of gives you different opportunities to either try and develop players sort of in slightly different ways in terms of helping them develop their identity, but also sort of, I guess, look at the game slightly different in terms of more sort of, I guess, the tactical stuff as well. But I'd say at the moment I'm really interested and really enjoying the younger ages in terms of help keep that initial spark, if you like.
Well, on that then, how would you kind of describe your coaching philosophy and principles? We ask this to guests all the time as well, because it's great to get an indication of kind of what's important to you. And if I was a player in your team, whether that's an under 10, 13 or 18, kind of what would it be like being a player being coached by you?
Yeah, so I was having to think about this recently, and I suppose it's probably one of them in terms of my sort of philosophy and values will, I guess, naturally and organically develop over time. But I suppose in terms of when I'm coaching, I want to try and show sort of a genuine care for players and try and help develop them as people as well as players. So try and develop them holistically, and then sort of provide experiences that sort of fulfill their needs in terms of, so with sort of the younger players, making sure they've still got that love of the game and I'm not taking it away from them, keeping that spark alight and, helping them develop the technical side of it and just really enjoy playing and loving being with the ball. So I suppose in terms of, the overall, that's what I'll try and do. And then I suppose sort of values that I guess are important to me in terms of, like I sort of mentioned there, in terms of showing that care and considering the individual first rather than just the players and putting the person first. And then, just try and make it as fun as possible in terms of for the players, but also in terms of coaching is a passion of mine as well. So I want to make sure that, what I'm doing is fun for the players, but I'm also enjoying it as well. And I suppose I was thinking the other day in terms of a value, in terms of, I sort of put it down as like limitless, if you like, in terms of for the players, but also for myself as well, but just providing a platform for the players that doesn't either fit them into a mold or limit their sort of potential in terms of what they could be or what sort of identity they could grow into. So it's, I suppose, just providing that platform where it's allowing players to develop in sort of a natural way without stopping them from going down certain routes or putting them into a mold, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, totally. Yeah, especially the younger age groups, right? Because they're still, there's a long way to go yet before they find out who they are as people and certainly as football players. And what would your session look like if I was watching your under 10s next week? What would I see?
Yeah, so I suppose in terms of the academy program, so it's sort of been refreshed recently in terms of the approach. So in terms of a foundation phase session, as coaches, we're given sort of ownership in terms of how it looks in terms of the session, but I suppose we've got key stuff that we need to try and cover throughout that, and it's nothing sort of groundbreaking, but we sort of, as a club, identifies some key sort of techniques in terms of the players need to develop sort of during their foundation phase, but also continuing as they grow older. So it's quite a high sort of technical focus in terms of the younger ages, and then drip feeding in sort of elements of the game and principles that they can apply. But it's really sort of focused around, I guess, the individual and how they complete or carry out different techniques to allow them to perform whatever it is in the game. So it's really trying to give them that sort of technical hard drive or toolbox, if you like, to rely upon in the games. And I guess in terms of training, there will be sort of unopposed elements to it in terms of learning technique, but at the same time, the importance of decision making and that perceptual side of it as well is really important. So sort of 1v1s, 2v2s, 2v1s, small sided games, which are got different rules and conditions, all that sort of stuff will feed into it. So it's still a mix. But I suppose the younger ages, we've got that sort of technical focus in terms of developing those sort of key techniques as well.
And how much time would you get with the players? Obviously, at the moment, there's nothing happening. But if all things being normal, how much time would you get with the under 10s over a week?
Yeah, so I suppose this season we've sort of done 2 weekly training sessions, sort of about an hour and a half each, and then we have a match on the weekend. Last year we had 3 sessions a week, so that sort of increased it. But obviously with COVID and everything, it's changed at the moment. So I suppose, yeah, at the moment, pre sort of this lockdown, it was about sort of 3 hours or so a week in terms of training, and then we've got our sort of match day on the weekend, or if the game's been cancelled, then we'll have another session sort of thing. So.
And how do you approach matches with them? I mean, is it competitive in the sense of you go to win these games, or do you look those as, are they learning opportunities and you just try things out with the players?
Yeah, so for me, I see sort of the game as, I guess, an extension of training in terms of either allowing them to further develop whatever it is we've been focusing on in training. And for me, it's the priority is the development of these kids, and that sort of long-term picture in terms of, although don't get me wrong, winning is important and winning is part of football, and that's still, I'm not here to say winning is not part of obviously the approach, but the development is the overall priority. And there's not any sort of league tables or anything like that for like with grassroots, and there's not that sort of side of it. So it's not a case of, we've got to win these next 4 games to be top of the league. It's more about how we can try and support the individuals to further develop their techniques or whatever it is they've been working on in training, or whatever it is that's personal to them in terms of their needs within the game as well. So it's definitely that development first.
You did your UEFA B obviously relatively recently. How much has that helped you just generally, but also I guess more with the younger players? Because I guess the UEFA B is kind of looked at as being more for 11-a-side kind of game. I reckon.
Yeah.
I've not done my UEFA, so I don't know. But I wondered how much of that has been useful when you're coaching in the foundation phase.
Yeah, definitely. I think, like I said, it is more suited in terms of the 11v11 game. I suppose in terms of that experience for me, it might sound a bit weird, but I suppose before I went on the UEFA B, I thought I coached, but I actually didn't. It was more sort of, I guess, facilitating. And although facilitating can be sort of a clever way of coaching in terms of allowing players, I think it really sort of hit home to me in terms of recognizing how I can add value, but how I can sort of work and intervene to do that. And I'm not saying I'm stopping, my boys for 10 minutes and telling them this, and this, but it's recognizing sort of, how I, as a coach, can help shape and guide players and drip feed in different stuff within the sessions as well. So I suppose in terms of, that UEFA B experience, it was brilliant for me in terms of, I guess, like I said, recognizing what I really need to do to actually be true to myself and be a coach properly in terms of helping the players. But I suppose it allowed me, obviously at the time I was working with under 18, so it allowed me to do sort of quite cool sort of an analysis I was doing whilst I was at uni as well. So I suppose other aspects in terms of looking at stuff in more detail and sort of that approach as well. But I suppose, in terms of what I can apply now to the under 10s, I've still got that sort of detailed approach in terms of, I don't know, in terms of when I prepare for a session, if I feel unprepared, then I don't feel as confident. So I like to have quite a detailed approach. However, with this season, for example, with the younger ones, although I've had that detailed approach, I've had to make my plan almost not simpler, but clearer in terms of the messages that I want to get across, and sort of focus around, like I said, the technical work as well. So it's a case of having that knowledge, but being able to apply it in a way that's suitable for the environment that I'm working with.
You've done a lot, but you're still very early in your coaching journey. But you've done a lot in that short space of time. I wonder, as a snapshot right now, if you reflect back from your first few coaching sessions a few years back to now, what would you say were some of the things that maybe you didn't get right back then that maybe you're more confident you're getting right now?
Yeah, I think in terms of, I definitely still get a lot of things wrong, and it's, I come away from every session, like I'm sure most people do, thinking, if I could do this slightly different, or actually I could tweak this or whatever. But I suppose in terms of, reflecting back, obviously a few years in terms of when I first started and where I am now in terms of, like I just mentioned there, in terms of what I thought was a coach before, in terms of what I think is a coach now, but also I suppose in terms of, for me, a really important approach or perspective that I've got now in terms of the importance of that sort of human connection and the person. And I suppose in terms of when I first started, perhaps naively, in terms of just thinking football, it was more about sort of the X's and O's. And although that's important, it's, it's flipped its head in terms of, now I'm really sort of focused on how I can help the individuals. And that's something I want to get better at and definitely can. But I suppose, being able to speak to different people about sort of coaching and getting some different sort of feedback to really sort of strengthen that view. And I mean, I don't know if you or any of your listeners have sort of heard of Keith Mayer and the Gold Dust podcast.
Yeah, very good.
So I've been quite fortunate to be able to speak to him, and you won't mind saying, but in terms of on a few occasions, and sort of, if you're looking for someone in terms of to inspire coaches and sort of provide, like I said, the gold dust in terms of that human connection and how powerful that is. I suppose he's really had quite a big impact, and although I've never actually met him in person, I've spoken to him a few times, he's actually had quite a big impact in terms of, I guess, how I see coaching and the priorities within that.
What you've done well, I think, George, is you've exposed yourself to people early on, networked out, and kind of thrown yourself in there. And when you do that, inevitably you pick things up, don't you? It doesn't mean you have to like everything or take everything on, but just by seeing it and having a look out there and stepping outside just your immediate environment, that can only add value to you as a coach, and therefore hopefully add to your toolbox and then help your players add to their toolboxes, right? And it seems like that's what you've been doing over, really, well, since the start of your coaching journey.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, well, it's quite funny. I suppose in terms of, like I said, I suppose when I first started coaching at 16 or started the community stuff, I suppose my long-term aim was I thought it'd be so cool to be like involved in academy football. And I suppose I've somehow managed to stumble across that already. And I'm thinking, blooming heck, I didn't think I'd actually get there this quick, sort of thing. And I don't think that's anything to do with me in terms of my coaching or anything. I think it's more the fact that I've started off voluntary and sort of got to know people in and around the club, and sort of gradually worked my way and built experience and worked my way through. And I suppose it's a weird one. I think sort of, if I didn't volunteer and if I wasn't picking up cones on a Monday night, and if anyone's in Cornwall and knows Brannel and it's chucking down with rain, if I wasn't there sort of watching sessions and picking cones up, I wouldn't be in the position now where I am in terms of, being an academy coach and being in this environment, which I feel really lucky to be in. So I suppose it's one of them where I suppose wherever I could try to offer in some way, even if, like I said, it's just picking up cones or just helping, assisting, and just trying to gain any experience I can, which I feel will add to my sort of toolbox, if you like.
Well, it certainly has. And I wondered if you could tell us a bit about what you've kind of been doing alongside, I guess, the work you actually do out on the grass. And this is a resource you've been creating, which, and correct me if I'm wrong here, George, but I kind of see it as under the umbrella of my coaching journey. So that's kind of like the umbrella, if you like. And you've got your website, YouTube, and stuff you put out on Twitter. Can you tell us a bit about kind of what that is, where it comes from, and I guess what you're hoping to do with it?
Yeah, so I started, I wasn't on Twitter, I was on sort of in terms of personal Twitter before, but in terms of, didn't really do much in terms of coaching on there before. And when I was doing my sort of UEFA B, I thought, why not just create an account and just share a few bits every now and again in terms of, it might be rubbish to some people, or some people might take an interest. So I thought I'd just share it. And I suppose I sort of went down that my coaching journey route. I don't really know what I did, to be honest, but that sort of just stuck. And I've gone from there, really. And I suppose I just created it really to share some ideas and work that I've done, and in some way it might add value to someone's work. And I suppose similar to like you're doing yourself in terms of the podcast, just sharing different ideas and I suppose within that coaching community, just sharing different ideas and hopefully adding value to other people's sort of work that they do. And I know, listen to your podcast, I'm sure yours have with your previous episodes as well. So I suppose it was, started off with the Twitter, and then, I suppose recently I've sort of got a few videos on my YouTube channel, which, again, some of the ones on there I sort of created during the first lockdown, and it was more a case of just a little bit out of my comfort zone, but I thought I'd just give it a go and just, what's worst can happen. And then from there, sort of, the website is basically, because I find Twitter great in terms of sharing stuff, but I find it quite easy to lose stuff in terms of you might see something and it might then after a month or so you sort of lost it, or it's hard to come by. So I sort of thought if I can get it in some half logical fashion in terms of on the website, in terms of if anyone wanted to go and look at something, they can just click on it or whatever and go from there. And I suppose that's just something that I guess long term I'll just continue to add sort of resources or ideas or whatever it is that I feel sort of suitable or might provoke some thought, really.
So you're going to let it just grow organically. That's the plan, really. Just see how it kind of goes moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of the initial plan, just to continue to add to it, sort of as and when when I feel I've got any sort of resources that could be of any value or anything in terms of just provoking different ideas, really.
Well, I've seen it, and it's funny you mentioned about your obviously the full-time role, if you like, around social media and marketing, right? That's what you kind of do.
Yeah,
Your
so I
full-time role,
suppose,
if you like, you
yeah,
can see that in the stuff you produce because it's polished, it's very good. So, like,
thank you. Yeah,
content aside, what he actually says, which comes to in a minute, just the way it looks and stuff is very good. So that makes sense now with the background that you've got and what you do for a full-time role.
yeah. Well, I suppose it's quite funny, really. I mean, I joined sort of the county FA I'm working at in terms of when I originally joined, it was a sort of a junior football development sort of role. So I was sort of helping different aspects of the business, but it's more sort of the development side of sort of grassroots football, really. Over sort of, I guess, the last sort of about 4 months now, I've sort of been doing that marketing role in terms of there's been a sort of restructure and stuff. So it's sort of fallen into place quite nicely, really, in terms of, I suppose, I like to try and make things look pretty if I can, but like, I suppose, it's fallen into place in terms of help further that sort of side of it as well, if you like.
George, and don't get me wrong, it's great that it does look very good, but ultimately what's most important is actually, the content and what it says rather than how it looks, right? I think that's when I first reached out to you. It probably was in the first lockdown because I saw some of the slides you'd put up on Twitter and I thought they were brilliant, really, really good. And it showed the level of detail and just the detail is great, but almost just the fact that you'd highlighted it as things. And I hadn't seen so much being spoken about some of this stuff back then. Things like a winning mentality or creating positive training environments, these things weren't really being spoken about on their own. And you had done that in these slides. And I wondered if you don't mind if we just take a few minutes to go through maybe just 3 or 4 of them and you just chat around what people would see if they were looking at it. I know they can find it on your Twitter feed and stuff because they're still out on the website. But if you don't mind, we could just chat around a few of those. Is that okay?
Yeah, definitely. No, that sounds good.
So I think one of the first ones that grabbed me, which I really liked, was you did a slide, if you can remember this. It was on session design considerations. If you could speak a bit about that, if you can recall it.
Yeah, no, that's cool. So in terms of, I suppose, I call them sort of coach resource slides, if you like. The idea behind that was, it was during the first lockdown. I obviously had a bit of extra time, but it was more a case of just trying to put down ideas or knowledge or stuff that my brief experiences before, try and put it down onto paper as a sort of either a refresher for me, but then also, like I said earlier, hopefully share some ideas as well. But yeah, in terms of, I guess, the session design stuff, it was just trying to highlight different things that might influence the way you plan a session or in terms of, that approach. So just, I suppose, some important things on there in terms of, so for me, in terms of, this is something I took from my B license as well, in terms of the tutor I was working with as well, who's really influential in terms of my coaching. He sort of would always say, if you're looking at your training session, if you're doing whatever activity it is, could you pick it up and just drop it in a game? And would it fit? Would it look right? So I suppose in terms of that representative design, could you effectively pick up your practice? And if you dropped it into a game, would it look like part of the game? Now, obviously, practices are designed in different ways, which they might not look entirely the same, but if they've still got that transferability and the key sort of principles or situations that you would have in a game, then that's a good starting point, because ultimately that's what we're trying to prepare them for. And then, I suppose considering some other stuff, so in terms of sort of like the practice spectrum, so again, how are you going to structure your practices? So what do they look like? So it might be, I guess, a blocked or a structured practice where there's quite sort of low variables. So, a typical one to think of would just be passing to a partner back and forth. So there's not much decision making, but there's loads of repetition in terms of the passing and control. So although you can, I guess, progress that and make it more relevant and representative, it's more a case of really trying to refine that technique in sort of a structured way, if you like. And then sort of the other end is more game-based, where it's lots of chaos and sort of that more random approach, which again has got great benefits in terms of the decision making and sort of transferring those techniques or skills into practice. So just considering sort of where on that sort of scale your practices might fall and how or what benefits can they return. When I look to try and plan a session, whenever I look at that sort of how I'm going to structure it, I always consider what's the outcome going to be, what am I going to get from it, because ultimately you might, like I said, with the block stuff, it might be you don't get as much sort of decision making or less chaos, but actually they're getting lots of good returns in terms of really sort of refining their technique on dribbling moves or whatever it is. And then obviously you can sort of build upon that and increase the sort of challenge as you go through. And then, I suppose just some other elements as well. So think about sort of, like I said earlier, so realism. So does it look like the game? Is it realistic to the game? Sort of the relevance. So is it suitable for your players' sort of needs and their sort of stage of development? So for example, with my under 10s now, I'm not going to do something that would be suitable for, men's football, for example, or if I did, it would definitely be toned down and more suited to their needs. And then looking at, again, like the repetition. So for example, if I'm looking at ball striking or shooting, for example, in the session, if that's my focus, then they've got to get lots of repetition of that. And that doesn't mean just a block practice. That might be in a game. So, for example, one practice that I quite like in terms of when we're doing finishing or shooting or ball striking is sort of a small-sided game where the pitch is like a diamond, so it's sort of funneled in towards the goals. And basically, if they score from their own half, they get 2 goals or 3 goals. If they score in the attacking half, it's 1. So it's really short, sharp games. First 2 goals win or first goal wins. But there's just loads of repetition of shooting in different ways. And because it's a game, there's so much sort of variety in terms of the types of shots. So depending on your pressure, it might be or the situation, whips, volley, whatever it is that happens, it's, I suppose, just natural and part of that game, but they're still getting that repetition, which we want in terms of the focus of the session.
The challenge for us as coaches, and I think this is one where we get, with experience, we tend to get better at, is getting that repetition and realism at the same time, isn't it? Because we can make something that's repetitive and you can repeat the same practice, whatever that may be, like shooting, passing, whatever we receive in the ball. But to get the repetition and also to make it real and game-like. I love the bit you said about, can you drop it into the game? Like, that's a challenge. If you can find ways to manipulate, to work on certain aspects of the game that you want to work on with the players that you've got, that allows lots of repetition, but also keeps that realism, well, that's good coaching, isn't it? That's what this is about, surely.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's something I'm still developing in terms of, designing practices that, feel and look like the game, but they're still getting that repetition as well. But I suppose ultimately, especially with the younger ones, they just, all they want to do is play games and score goals and that sort of thing. So it's making it fun as well. And it's sometimes, they're learning with or practicing whatever it is you want to focus on without even realizing at times. So it's, trying to almost disguise parts of it as the game, within the game. Yeah.
And still on session design, George, how much of the session would you focus on the group of players and how much might you focus on individuals?
Yeah, so I suppose, I don't know if there's a definitive answer to that, but I suppose in terms of previously of sort of planned sessions around certain individuals or small groups in terms of giving them repetition or situations that are relevant to their sort of development, or likewise, or alternatively, it might be within that session. I'm sure lots of coaches do in terms of, I guess, I don't know, I call it like flyby coaching, or I've heard others call it like ghost coaching and stuff, where, if you're working with someone else, or even if you're in the game or practice, for example, you're going to sort of intervene or just chat to one person rather than the group and give them sort of individual feedback and work with them individually. And you might do that for a few different players, or, bullseye 2 or 3 different players within the session that you work within. Yeah, because I suppose ultimately it's very hard to give all players what's relevant to their individual needs within one session. In terms of if you've got 10, 15 players, it's quite hard. Well, it's hard to provide that individual approach for all of them within a session, and they're all obviously going to get sort of returns from it. But I suppose it's and again, it's something I'm trying to develop as I go forwards, but identifying how I can support different individuals' needs throughout a series of sessions, and it might sort of blend within the overall topic as well, sort of thing.
Okay, brilliant. I want to do a couple more of these, if that's okay. I've got 4 here,
Yeah.
but we'll see when we get through. But I'd like to do the match day considerations, if that's okay. Because, again, that was a good one, which I think sometimes, I work in the grassroots space, and I think as coaches, generally speaking, we've improved a lot on our training. I still think there's work to do on the match day. And it was great seeing you highlight this on the slide that you put. So can you talk us through your match day considerations slide and what you mentioned there?
Yeah, definitely. So I suppose, similar again, it was trying to collect different thoughts in terms of how you might prepare or how you might sort of, I guess, behave on a match day in terms of when you're coaching. So highlighting different areas. So I guess common ones that you probably all think about is sort of different objectives in terms of the approach to the game. But again, that might be broken down in terms of sort of individual objectives, and it might be this may be sort of towards the older ages as well. But thinking about sort of units. So, for example, I don't know, your 2 centre backs or your midfield unit. So that might come a little bit older. But I suppose just having that consideration of, as a team today, we want to achieve this, but especially for the younger ages, how can individuals, what what could they try and achieve, what's relevant to them. And again, that's something I'm trying to sort of develop as we go forwards, but just having that consideration of, I guess what you want out of the game really, and what you want to try and get out of the game. And then, I suppose sort of section on there about sort of feedback, so different types of feedback that you might use. And I suppose over the last sort of season or two, I've sort of, I guess, been sort of learning in terms of how different types of feedbacks might work within a game. So for example, obviously, when you're playing the game, it is quite chaotic at times, and it can be quite difficult sometimes for individuals to take on information. So sometimes with players I've found, and it's individual and it might vary at different times, but some players might just prefer to be told stuff in the game rather than to be asked a question, which might confuse them and then consequently make them either miss what you're trying to portray in terms of the message, or do something different. So sometimes I've done in the past where, and again, it's something I need to recognize perhaps a bit more as well, but perhaps giving sort of instruction in terms of within the game to an individual, but then following it up in the intervals in terms of, so for example, I don't know, Jimmy, so today I was asking you just to get a little bit wider in possession. Why do you reckon I was asking you to do that? What did it help you do? What did it help others do? So I suppose it's because I'm conscious I don't want it to be a case of just, autocratically telling players what to do, because ultimately they're the ones that's playing. But I suppose it's having that consideration again of sometimes players might need a bit of instruction, a bit of help, and then followed up with the questioning. And it's quite interesting. I did with on the previous season with the older boys I was working with, I actually asked some of them what they would prefer in terms of communication in the game. And quite a lot of them said, I'd rather just be told what I need to do and then follow up on it after. And I suppose it's one of them. Sometimes players might just want that, but you might need to just try and provoke it out of them, or likewise, you might need to give them the instruction and just follow up on it after. Because, I've played, and I'm sure you played a bit as well, in terms of when you're playing, sometimes you've got so much on your mind, or you're really focused on something. The last thing you want is just 30 seconds of a question or something, and you're like, just go away. Do you know what I mean? So, it's that sort of consideration as well in terms of the feedback. And then, I suppose building on that really, looking at sort of, I guess, opportunities to involve the players as well. So something I've done quite a lot with my under-10s this year is basically so we normally have one or two players that'll be resting during the period or for parts of the period that we're playing. And they're effectively feeding back to the group. So giving them that ownership of, right, actually, how do you think that the boys have done so far? What would you change, or what could you suggest that we've done well or could improve on, and giving them that ownership? Because ultimately I could be there and tell them all the answers or what I think of the answers, but I think it's quite powerful, and obviously with the sort of the learning process as well, give them that opportunity to engage and take ownership of that, and then hopefully at times I can just guide them and provide the extra support as well. And then there's a few other bits on there, but I suppose one thing as well, that especially with the under 13, so we only had one squad, but there was two coaches, myself and then the lead coach. It worked quite well in terms of we would sort of have different roles on the match day. So obviously this is sort of dependent, and although it's it's quite a luxury having two coaches in some situations, but considering how you operate and sort of what you're focusing on. So for example, I might focus on in possession today, you might focus on out of possession, and then sort of our feedback is either not conflicting in terms of if we both do everything, but at the same time it's clearer for us what we're trying to observe in the game to hopefully provide sort of more accurate and clearer feedback for the players as well. And then just other sort of methods in terms of before we've had it. So one person is the voice in terms of they're the only one that feeds back to the players in terms of during the game. So it's that one common voice. And then I might be the person that sort of either looks at individuals or looks at certain elements and sort of chats with the coach as we're going through the game and just suggests or highlights different bits. And then the other coach might be the person that actually feeds back the information in terms of during the live game as well.
So many great points in there, George. And I did love that style when I saw it. And a mistake that I made when I first started coaching, having a co-coach alongside, is we would be on match days and we'd both be shouting at the players, not shouting, but certainly giving instructions, both of us, not even necessarily conflict instructions, but just two voices, very loud. And these were under 6, under 7s. It's ridiculous when you reflect back on it. But one thing I learned quickly was, well, first of all, just have one voice, because that's a step in the right direction. So you can have two sets of eyes, but have one voice. And that's a great point you make about that. The second thing was it's okay asking questions. I'm a big fan of asking the players questions, 100%, but it is how you ask it, isn't it? And actually the important thing is the why behind it, isn't it? So you can give an instruction if you want to, as long as the player understands why that instruction has been given to them and what it means in context. I think the danger when you first start coaching, and what I still see now, and I'd say probably on occasion still do myself, is you just give an instruction without really having the why behind it or any kind of question. And I think that's where you let the players down a little bit too. But the point I loved the most, and I remember seeing this thinking, I do some of this, but I could do it better, was actually, you know what, rather than having your 2 or 3 subs sitting there kind of just kicking the ball or picking grass or whatever else, make them your assistant coaches, give them responsibility and get them involved. And we did that at the young ages, under 7s, 8s and 9s, and would give them a task, okay, tell us who's doing really well in this quarter, and why. So when we come back for the quarter team talk or the halftime team talk, you can say who you think's done really, really well against our objectives as a team and why you've done that. And it really is impactful because it keeps their engagement, it makes them analyze, and it allows them to reflect in a positive way on their peers, which then also gives them that kind of subliminal learning themselves, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, even, when I've done it with the under-10s this season, you'd be surprised what they pick up on and what they feed back and the way they do it. And obviously it's different between individuals, but some kids absolutely love that sort of role and being able to feed back and that sort of side of it. And I suppose on the flip side, if someone's, perhaps a bit more shy in terms of like I was as a player, it actually just slowly introduces them to that sort of communication, the more social side of it, and just slowly develops that over time as well. So it's, it just provides different benefits, I guess.
Lots of life skills in that, isn't there, really? That ownership, communication, responsibility, reflection. There's loads in there, isn't there? I mean, these are wonderful things that sport can bring to young athletes, especially who are, starting off on their life journeys as much as their sports journeys, and all these wonderful transferable life skills. One of the other slides I really liked, and it might be the last one I mentioned here before we move on to the next bit, was the one, again, I thought you were kind of brave to highlight it and use the word as well, which, I agree with you is part of all competition, but you don't often see it highlighted. It's that winning mentality. And you had a slide on winning mentality considerations. Are you happy to talk a bit about that one as well?
Yeah, we can touch upon that. Yeah, I suppose I'll put that together. So I suppose when we had the first lockdown, we had a few sort of, I guess, CPD sessions in terms of as a club's academy staff getting together and discussing some different topics and stuff. And this was sort of one of them, and quite fortunate in the fact that we had a sort of couple of ex-pros in terms of that were involved in the coaching staff. And it was really interesting to get their insight in terms of what they felt a winning mentality was and what ultimately allowed them to have that mentality to go on to be a professional player. And I suppose a lot of it was underpinned by sort of that growth mindset in terms of always sort of wanting to improve and always sort of accepting the fact that you can continually improve and you've never sort of got to that end point in terms of you're never sort of the finished product. And I suppose that goes for coaches as well. And I suppose, one of the really sort of evident bits in terms of obviously that just informal discussion, but was sort of that desire to be the best, but also willing to put that extra effort in and basically do the work that no one's seeing. So one of the coaches who he's played in the World Cup and stuff, he was saying when he was a kid, whenever he had free time, all he would do is just be out playing with the ball and just continue to do those extras. And then when he got older, it'd be more sort of structured stuff, but it was always putting in that extra work to really, because he wanted to be the best he could and be the best striker he could. So it's about having that sort of, accepting that responsibility in terms of I can always improve. How am I going to do it? Do I have that desire to do it as well? And I suppose if you were to ask me how to give that to players or whatever, I wouldn't have the answer in terms of that side of it as well. But I suppose again, it was just things to consider. Common themes in terms of professionals you see like Ronaldo and stuff, always doing the extras and stuff like that. But also, I guess just a few little insights in terms of some conversations I've been involved with as well, really.
There's no shortcut to it, is there? It's about hard work and a good mentality, I guess, and a good mindset and a good attitude and application. And how much do you think of that is driven by the environment in which the players are in? I mean, could you have a player that's kind of really got a good attitude and regardless of the coach environment, they're going to succeed? Or do you think really for it to work, you need to have that environment to kind of help drive that forward, especially younger players?
Yeah, I think definitely having that sort of positive environment that sort of fosters that want and that want to improve and gives them those opportunities to improve and sort of, I guess, doesn't limit the players as to what they can try and do. And I guess lockdown's been quite interesting in terms of seeing how some players have really developed in terms of the technical side of it, in terms of, for example, juggling. Some players like doing thousands of keepy ups, whereas before they perhaps couldn't. And I suppose it's having that desire to just improve. And obviously, that might be situation specific, but I suppose, it's definitely having that environment that, I guess, challenges and continues to challenge players in an appropriate way. Will hopefully help facilitate that as well.
And I'm curious, how did you choose those particular themes or topics? Were these just things you were passionate about, or things you needed attention being drawn to them? Why those? Because you could have done, I'm sure, hundreds of different ones. They're brilliant and I love them, but I wonder why you chose those.
Yeah, so I suppose a lot of them, so for example, like developing positive coach-athlete relationship, behaviour management, sort of positive environment, session design and stuff. Though I suppose they were areas that I felt were quite important to my coaching, but also, I guess, coaching in a wider aspect. And I suppose there were sort of areas that I covered before, and it was an attempt to try and basically put together some pretty notes, really, and hopefully some sort of value in terms of, for me, in terms of refreshing and, I guess, going over that those experiences and knowledge again to hopefully refine it and reinforce it, but also, like I said, share it as well. But I suppose, like in terms of I haven't really spoke about the behaviour management side of it, a lot of that I've sort of put down on there has been based off my community coaching that I've done in terms of in-school PE lessons and stuff. So working in schools for 4 or 5 years or whatever, primary schools, there's all sorts of situations that you're in which without that, I definitely wouldn't be working in terms of the academy environment. Now that sort of I guess behaviour management and all those aspects of it, just communication with the children and that human connection, again, without that experience and without that sort of definitely getting it wrong a few times and learning from that definitely has underpinned sort of my coaching now, really. So it was just a case of trying to any bits that I felt were sort of relevant and important, try and put it together, really.
It kind of reads to me like what you did was you kind of went through your experience and you kind of put things in categories, rightly so, and they're like cheat sheets you can refer back to. So you just kind of remind yourself what the key things were that you learned and are important to you. And I'm sure you could change and add things as you carry on. But that, to me, like you did the work for us. So it was like, hey, these are brilliant. These are my cheat sheets. Some things I kind of thought I was comfortable with, and other things they were new information. But either way, it was all in one place, and it kind of is a little or a checklist if you want. But either way, it's just to make sure that you're staying on course with these kind of key themes, I think.
Yeah, definitely, I'm not here saying I do every single one of them, because I definitely don't. Or there's definitely ones I can improve on massively. But I suppose, like you said, I suppose now, especially with recent times, in terms of the amount of I guess resources in terms of webinars or whatever, it's brilliant in terms of the access that coaches can get in terms of the different stuff. But I suppose part of that was thinking, actually, the amount of time I actually spend properly reflecting on what I've learned is probably, is definitely a lot smaller than, what I tune into and whatever. So it was a case of trying to, remember stuff more than anything, really. Yeah. So it's, like you said, trying to put it together as a reference, really.
Another part of the wonderful resources you've put out there in the public domain that I've seen as well is your YouTube videos, and they are very good. Could you talk us through, I'm conscious of time, so I don't want to go on all, but just talk us through kind of how they come about, and again, what your points are, because you've got the Train Like James Ward-Prowse ones, you've got the dribbling moves, the turning tutorials, learn how to hide the ball like Hazard. You've got some really good stuff up there, kind of. You've got some which you giving demos, you've got some where you're doing the one-to-one coaching. Just a bit of background to the videos themselves, if you don't mind, George, and then, what were you hoping to achieve with those, and what will people get out from watching them?
Yeah, so I suppose, again, that was, I guess, just something new that I thought I'd just try and see how it got in terms of, something a little bit out of my comfort zone. But in terms of the resource slides, I haven't done all of them, but there's a few on there where I sort of have a 20-minute discussion in terms of just covering points, I guess, similar to like we've just done there, in terms of basically why I've put them down and what importance they might have or what relevance. And then I suppose in terms of, so I don't do too much one-to-one coaching, but I really enjoy it, and I feel it's, when I get to do it, it's really rewarding in terms of the fact that you can work with individuals on, really focus on stuff that relevant to their needs or what they enjoy doing. And I suppose that sort of, I sort of called it Train Like James Ward-Prowse, in terms of that sort of session was all geared up on how sort of, receiving skills as in terms of James Ward-Prowse, because that was the player's favourite player, so their role model. So it was trying to base it around the role model to inspire them from there. But yeah, that was really rewarding. I suppose I just thought I'd try and clip a few bits up just to give a few ideas again. And yeah, I suppose in terms of the tutorials, in terms of dribbling moves and turning moves, yeah, again, that was just a case of trying to share some ideas of sort of core moves that will help players in terms of turning or dribbling. But again, I suppose from a personal side, it was, so this season, like I said earlier, we've got quite a focus on the technical development of our players at the younger ages. So for me, it was trying to really unpick and I guess sort of understand how you perform certain moves effectively to hopefully improve my ability to teach them to the players within the sessions. And I suppose likewise with the learn to hide the ball, like Hazard, just at the younger ages, it's so important for players to be able to handle the ball and be able to hide the ball and escape. And you might have come across, well, I imagine you have sort of Pete Sturgis and the work he's done in terms of the foundation phase. So that sort of built off that really in terms of, firstly, how can you hide the ball really well, but also different moves. So obviously you don't want to just hide the ball forever. You want to try and escape into free space. So different moves that I suppose can give players the opportunity to escape and travel wherever they want to travel, really.
And is there plans to do more of the slides or the videos? What's going to happen with this now? Or is it going to just happen organically as and when you think it's right, you'll do some more, or have you got a plan with this?
Yeah, I think, I suppose at the moment there isn't a set plan. I guess, again, it's probably going to be more organic, short term. I'd like to do more of it. I suppose at the moment, I'm quite sort of busy in terms of work, coaching, and then my masters as well. So it's a case of, sometimes I've got some ideas, but don't necessarily have the time to go and actually put it into place. So I suppose going forwards, it'll probably be quite natural short term. But again, that's just going to be something that hopefully I can add to going over time, really. And if it helps anyone, then brilliant. But if not, then I've just made a video.
No, honestly, George, they're fantastic. I think it's really, really good. I think for experienced coaches, it's great to look and reflect and question yourself whether you'd agree with all the bits or add things and stuff. So it gets you thinking. I think for less experienced coach, they're gold dust. They really are, because it immediately it almost shortcuts all that learning you put in over those years, and it gives you almost a quick route to that key stuff that would really help all coaches, I think, just think about how they approach their players in their sessions. So well done for putting it together. It certainly has that polished look, but more importantly, it has wonderful content around it. So fair play, George. It's really good stuff. And I hope you keep doing more of it, because I will be using them. I promise you that. So please.
Cheers. Appreciate it.
Before we finish off, if you've got a few more minutes, that's all right. Just a couple of last questions, if you've got time, George. Is that okay?
Yeah, no, that's fine, yeah.
Yeah. So I wondered, do you have a favourite session or practice? I know this is not always easy to answer, but, some coaches have their go-to session that there's a little game or something. But I wondered if you've got anything you'd lean on. If you had to do a session now because the phone rang, you've got to go out on the grass the next half an hour, what might you put on?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd necessarily have a favourite session, but I suppose in terms of things that I think are valuable, in terms of, if I just think about the younger ages, obviously it might look a bit different going up the ages. But I suppose in terms of some stuff that we alluded to so far, in terms of lots of ball mastery, but also 1v1 work. So like we alluded to then, the hiding the ball and playing 1v1. So I suppose I did a session earlier, just before Christmas really, which was probably one of the most enjoyable sessions that, from my perspective as a coach, but also I feel that resonated for the players, because sometimes you might think it's great, but actually the players probably don't get much out of it. But I think both sides it was really valuable in terms of, it was all around it was sort of following on before actually the sort of learn to hide the ball at Hazard video, in terms of being able to protect the ball and hide the ball, but then being able to escape. And I sort of been quite fortunate in terms of got a contact who does in terms of a coach over in Canada called Sanjeev. He's on Twitter as well. You might have come across him. Does sort of lots of work in terms of Futuro Soccer Academy, and his approach to, I guess, individual development, but technical development is like really, really interesting in terms of the creative side that he adds into it. And he sort of used a medicine ball in terms of player have a medicine ball and they're basically pushing the other players when they're trying to dribble around the area. So they've got to try and protect the ball and then spin off. And I suppose that was quite a nice introduction in terms of players getting used to contact and then using different moves to escape it before you then sort of scaffold and add that actual real pressure on top of it. And that sort of just led into, a 1v1 game where they've got too mmany goals back to back in an area. Players start in the middle, you bounce the ball in the middle, so it's in the end they've basically got to win the ball to get their body in between the other player, hide the ball, and then escape and go and score. And then that led into a game which I stole from Pete Sturgis, where if they score, the winning team's got to get a ball and protect it 1v1 until the coach says stop or whatever magic word. And then if all the players have got the ball, they keep the goal, sort of thing. So it was one of them where it just flowed really nicely. But in terms of the returns to the players on what we wanted to get out of the session, that was really high as well. So that was, pretty enjoyable, that one.
It's always great when you enjoy it as much as the players do, or vice versa, right? That's what you want, isn't it? When everyone leaves feeling that was good and high energy, lots of intensity, lots of fun, but also lots of outcomes. Sounds good. Good way to finish up before the lockdown. But I bet you can't wait to get back out there again and start doing it all again. Final question, then, really, just we ask all the guests this one: if there was one thing you could change in the world of coaching, what might that be?
I'm not too sure, really, but I suppose in terms of one thing that I guess it might be more personal to me rather than, I guess, the wider sort of community in terms of coaches. But I suppose almost like the perception of what coaching is. So in terms of, like, I suppose leading back to earlier in terms of the importance of that human connection and having that underpin everything really in terms of coaching. Whereas, like I said earlier, when I first started, it was all about the X's and O's and the football side of it. Whereas actually, I think that personal connection and the human connection is so important. And I'll link back to Keith Mayer that I mentioned earlier. So I was on a CPD, well, he was doing a CPD the other day and I managed to get on it, which was brilliant. But he's really passionate about this stuff. And he was sort of saying, it was quite, I guess, a point where I sort of was listening. I thought, that's sort of quite impactful really. But he was sort of saying, like, coaches, one of the main roles is to gain information from players and deliver messages. And some messages might stick, some might come too early, or some might come too late, or some just on the right time. And he sort of put it quite nicely in terms of coaches, especially for the younger players, are effectively postmen. So they're collecting information and delivering messages. And I thought that was quite a nice way to sort of put it all together, really. But yeah, I suppose that that sort of perception in terms of what underpins coaching, if you like, but also I suppose as well, like, I'm always quite conscious of what I'm doing. And I suppose as a coach, there's almost this sort of perception where if you ask for help, you're seen as unknowledgeable, or you've got some sort of lack of knowledge in an area. So I suppose in terms of, accepting the fact that you don't have all the answers, you never will. And I suppose that's something I've learned quite early on, really. And from that, it's allowed me to get so much support and feedback and guidance from other more knowledgeable people. That's really shaped me going forward. So I suppose, it might apply more in terms of younger or less experienced coaches, but just having that awareness that actually, if you ask someone for help, that's, you're trying to get better. So it's only going to help you, really. So I suppose might be a slightly different way of looking at it, but that sort of, I guess, perceptual side of it.
I think that's brilliant. I think that idea that you don't, just because you're the coach, you don't have to have all the answers and know it all. It's okay to be sometimes unsure and sometimes make mistakes. And I think actually, although we say it a lot, I think for a lot of coaches, that's not something they're don't deal with it very easily, and they, we might have the parents watching us, the players, the club, whatever it might be. There's that constant pressure to look like you've got full control. Well, let's be honest, no one has, however good you might be, you never got full control. And the reality is lots of us haven't got anywhere near full control. And it's just, I think it's a brilliant point. And if you can have the mindset that that's acceptable and that's okay, and also then you can take the people around you with that, especially the players on that journey, then that's not a bad thing either, because actually if they realize that they've got responsibility to help with the learning process as well, it's not all on you as the coach, well, that's great for them, because that will encourage accountability, ownership of those things we spoke about previously. That's one of the good ways of doing it. So it almost becomes like a coaching tool rather than something that you can use against you. It can be a positive thing.
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose it's because it was quite interesting at the moment. So we're doing a psychology module on the Masters. I won't go into too much, but I suppose we've just sort of touched upon and going to look into, I guess, the coach as a performer as well, in terms of the amount of, like players really, the amount of influences and different types of stress or stresses that can influence the coach. How do they deal with that in terms of to allow them to perform? So like we said, in terms of that with parents, for example, seeing that as perhaps a threat, if you like, but actually, it's they only want the best for the kids and you want the best for their kids. So actually you're working towards a common goal. So it's, I suppose, having that I don't know if it's vulnerability or bravery to just accept that and try and embrace it. But yeah, it's so important, I think.
Brilliant, Georgia. Thanks so much. So just finally then, really, what are your plans moving forward? You've got a long journey ahead of you. You've got the Masters going on right now and everything else, but what are you going to do? And do you have a vision for the next 3, 4, 5 years plus?
Yes, I suppose I've got ideas in terms of what I'd like to do, or areas that I'd like to try and work towards. I suppose I haven't got anything set in stone, but I suppose what I try and do and what I'm trying to do is just whatever I do going forwards is hopefully going to add value to me in terms of my ability to be a more effective coach, but a better person, and hopefully that will put me in good stead in terms of hopefully working my way into different opportunities that whatever arises. Because I suppose I've got ideas, but I don't want to just be fixated on them. So for example, when I first got into coaching, my thoughts might have been actually I want to be working first team football or whatever like that. But actually, although I've worked in sort of under 18s and the 11 side with the under 13s, and that was great and I enjoyed it, I think the rewards and benefits I'm getting from working with the younger kids as well is so powerful. So in terms of from when I started to where I am now, the, I guess, end goal or the end area that I want to work towards is definitely either changed or been influenced. So I suppose it's, trying to just do as much as I can and see where it takes me, really.
I've got no doubt, George, that whatever you do, it's going to be a success. Your passion, your quality and what you put into things, your attention to detail, your enthusiasm, just how much you've managed to cover in such a short space of time only bodes well for the future. And I'm intrigued to watch your journey, and please stay in contact. Please keep resources coming and sharing things because they're fantastic. But it'd be great to maybe catch up with you again in a year or 18 months time and see, what your thoughts are around we haven't even covered. I want to ask you this when we've got time now, but how you think maybe coaching will look in the future and things like that. So maybe would you be happy to come back on again at some point in a year or so and have a chat about how things are looking then?
Yeah, definitely. I think, I've really enjoyed it. I suppose, like we said off air just before, this has been my first podcast, but actually, it's been really great. And I suppose, what you're doing in terms of, sharing different ideas and with the guests that you get on your show is brilliant as well. So, I really appreciate coming on, and it's been great.
Thanks. You've been worth waiting for. It's much appreciated. I say it all the time, but the podcast's only as good as its guests. And people like you make a world of difference. And all I always remember when I do these and we finish, I just think back, like, if I was listening to this, would I want to hear it? And I definitely would. Now I would, but particularly maybe 3 or 4 years ago when I was still finding my feet a little bit. But even if I had been coaching for another 15 years time, I'd want to hear this. And what are young coaches out there thinking, feeling about the game, and what are they doing and stuff. So there's so much good stuff in what you said today, George. It's brilliant, and I know our listeners will get loads out of it. So thank you so much. If they want to reach out to you, obviously you were kind enough to come back to us through Twitter. Would you be happy for Coach to reach out to you? So if you happy to share your Twitter handle or another way of contacting you possibly? Also, please mention your website and the YouTube channel if that's okay, so people can find the resources there.
Yeah, so feel free to get in touch, and if I can help in any way, I'll try my best to. So I suppose in terms of the website, so it's just www.mycoachingjourney.co.uk, and I suppose that's where I look to just basically share stuff that goes on Twitter as well. But there's some contact details on there. But Twitter, feel free to get in touch with me on that. So the Twitter handle, it's mycoaching, and then it's JOUR and then a 1, so it's not quite the full My Coaching Journey, but feel free to get in touch with me there, and if there's any questions or anything, feel free to get in touch.
We'll put all that in the show notes. We'll put the website and your Twitter handle in the show notes. So thanks again so much for your time. It's really appreciated. Keep up the great work. I've got loads of resources already, the videos, the slides and everything else that you shared. So, please keep them coming because they're brilliant. And I look forward to maybe catching up again in a year or so's time and seeing where you're at there, if that's all right.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
Top man. Thanks, George.